I'm really having a bit of hiccups with the recording, so I apologize for the recording number 2. I did the entire video, and when I looked at it after, I saw it was blurry, so I was like, oh crap. So I apologize for that. But I ended that video by highlighting the fact that I did reach out to the Permanent Secretary of Health of Antigua in February, and I received no response to my email. We spoke on the phone twice. In March, and about 3.5 weeks ago was the last time we spoke. The 1st of March was the first time we spoke, and about 3.5 weeks was the last time we spoke. So I just thought, you know, that I feel as though I've done everything that I could have done on my end to figure this out, you know, to unravel all of what is going on, what has been going on. So this is me asking at least for some kind of attention, you know, to be given to this, because if I send an email to the government of Antigua or no one responds to it, you know, I just feel like as though I'm being pushed aside. So hopefully I get your attention here. So in 2016, like, how did all of this get about? In 2016, I was invited by JC's, Junior Chamber International in Antigua, to speak at their cancer conference. I advocate for cervical cancer. On the 1st of October, I spoke at the conference. My picture and my name was on the flyer. And while I was after I was finished speaking, I was still on stage and persons were asking questions. But the people who were asking questions were seated, except for one person. One woman was standing. So she stood out to me because she was the only person who naturally was standing. After I got off stage, there was a break. There was like a half an hour break, 20 minutes to half an hour break. And I spent that break time with the lady who was actually driving the ambulance that picked me up in 2004 from the airport. So that person was at the conference, and I spent that time with her. I actually recognized her while I was on stage. After the break ended, the second half of the symposium started, and about a few minutes in, one of the organizers tapped me and asked me if I was ready to eat, because my lunch had arrived. I'd ordered food before I even arrived in Antigua. So of course I said yes, because I'm a foodie, I love food, I love to eat. So he took me out of the room that I was in, where the conference was being held, and he walked me down the corridor to another room. They call it the canteen area, the canteen. So I sat there and I was eating my pigtail soup, and persons were coming in, checking on me periodically, having conversation. I even took pictures of me sitting there, eating. I had someone take pictures of me, which I have. About several minutes after, while I'm sitting there, the lady who stood to ask the question while I was on stage, she walked past the front of the building. She walked past the front of the canteen. And when she looked in, she saw me and she turned and came right back in. So she approached me, she started talking about, it's like just sharing stories of people she knew who had cervical cancer and stuff like that, just having a conversation. I thought it was a very engaging conversation, to the point where I said, hey, I would love to keep in contact with you. What's your name? And she told me her name is Beatrice Samuels. So, okay, I said, okay, and I always have a notepad. I always have a notepad and a pen with me, like it's right there right now. My notepad and 2 pens, they're right there. And I said, hey, I would love to keep in contact with you. She wrote her name and her number, her cell phone number, and as well as her landline in my notepad. And we kept talking. She told me her age, she's going natural, all of that stuff. And at one point, she said something about cervical cancer that was not correct. So I corrected her. And as I corrected her, she said, I know these things. I'm a nurse. So I said, you're a nurse? She said, yes, but I'm retired now. So I said, how long are you retired? She said, not long. She said, in 9 years, in 2007. She's retired in 2007. So she said she was a nurse at Halberton Hospital. I said, Halberton? She said, yeah. And we kept talking about different things, but I kept going back, Halberton. Like, I kept going back to Halberton and saying Halberton. And she said, yeah, you know Halberton? I said, yes, I was a patient there. And I said, yes, I was a patient there. And I said, I was in a Gwyneth O'Reilly ward. She said, I work on O'Reilly. I said, you work on O'Reilly? She said, yes, I work on O'Reilly. I said, I wasn't there in 2004. She said, I worked on O'Reilly in 2004. I said, you worked on O'Reilly in 2004? She said, yes. And I paused, like I'm stunned because this is like the first time in 12 years, like I'm meeting someone who worked there, you know, like a nurse in Antigua. So I said to her, I said, do you recall a situation where a young girl was on a Liat flight traveling and the flight in transit in Antigua, and during the in transit she fell ill and was hospitalized at Halberton. I paused and I said, she was pregnant. She looked at me and she said, yeah, I remember. I said, well, that girl was me. And she screamed. She was like, what? That was you? That was you? And I was just sitting there cool and calm. I was like, yeah, like, that was me. Like, this is me. She said, this is you? And instantly, the veins around the lady's eyes started to swell and tears settled in her eyes. So I said, why are you crying? Like, why do you have tears in your eyes? She looked at me and she said, I remember you. She said, I remember you. She said, I thought of you just a few days ago. I said, you thought of me a few days ago? Why? She said, yes. I thought of you just a few days ago. That was alarming to me. Like 12 years after you had so many patients in all your career and you think of me a few days ago? She said, yes. She said, I was your nurse. I nurse you. So you were my nurse? She said, yes. I was your nurse. I nurse you. And she looked at me and she said, that night the boy died. I said, boy? I didn't have a boy. I said, I had girls, twin girls, identical twin girls. And she looked at me, because I'm sitting and she's standing right there. And she said, that night, she said, you lost so much blood. So much blood. I said, blood? I didn't lose blood. I said, I wasn't hemorrhaging at all. I wasn't hemorrhaging. I said, my body needed blood transfusion, but I wasn't hemorrhaging. And she looked at me and she walked away. And then I tapped and I said, like my emotions really came out. Like I hit my hands on the table and I said, you cannot move from here. Of course, my voice was louder, but not in an argumentative way. My voice was louder and I said, you cannot move from here. I've waited 12 years for this. I said, do you know how it feels to live like this? I said, I know my children did not die. I know they didn't die. So call it mother instinct, call it whatever you want to call it, but I'm telling you that my children never died. And she came back, she turned back. She turned back. I think it was just too heavy for her, after so many years, she turned back. And I realized in that moment when she said that the boy died and I was hemorrhaging, that was whack. That was not it. I had no boys. But I had no boy. I gave birth to girls. But in that moment, I realized that they thought that I was so out of it that I had no clue what was going on. I remember stuff. So I took her back to the room in my mind. And I said to her, let me take you back to the room. That's exactly what I said to her. I said, let me take you back to the room. And I said, do you remember the fan? That black fan? I said, you remember it? I said, right now it's on. It's on right now. I said, the fan is right here. It's on. The windows are open. And right next to the fan, there is like a press, like a wardrobe, like a closet, where they store stuff in. I said, next to that closet, there was the girl, a crib. The girl who fell off of a truck. She was there. I said, my bed was across from her by the first window. I said, there was an arch. I said, do you remember the arch? She kept looking at me. I said, there was an arch with a black clock on it between the arch and the roof. I said, there were people. There was a girl in this corner. And I said, there was an elder lady on the far end. I told her everything that I remember, which I said in the first video. And when I got to the point, I said, that night I called for nurses. And no one came to me, so I called for the patient. I told her, like, when I gave birth, whatever happened. And when I mentioned, I said, I remember When the nurses, I said, I remember when the nurses took the babies from the chair and they put them to my bed, on my bed. And someone was, I said they were running. And I said, someone said, it's not sharp enough. She said, you remember that? You remember? I said, yes, I remember. You remember? I said, yes, I remember. Someone said it wasn't sharp enough. I don't know what they were talking about, but someone said it's not sharp enough. I said, I remember. I said, you see this? Like how this color of this hair is brown? The table I was at in that canteen was beige. Like that was the color of the tabletop. I said, you see this? I said, this is the exact same color of the piece of cloth that I wrapped the babies in. When they left the room with them, she said, you remember the color of the cloth? You remember? I said, yes, I remember. I remember. I said, when the nurses left the room with the babies, no one came back to me. No one came back. Everything was just me and the patient. And I said, the only person who came back to that room was a lady. She was wearing a beige colored uniform to the piece of cloth that I wrapped the babies in. But that lady had a mop and a bucket. And that lady went to mop the floor where my water bag broke. She said, you remember that? You remember? I said, yes, I remember. She said, you remember the lady with the mop and the bucket? You remember the color of her uniform? You remember? I said, yes, I remember. And she looked at me and she said, that lady was me. I said, that was you? She said, yes, that was me. I was the lady with the mop and the bucket. She went in either her bag or her pocket and she took out a keychain. And she said, this is how I used to look then. Her picture was in a keychain. She said, this is how she used to look then. She had on a nurse's uniform, like a passport size picture. But like the farther one, the one that isn't like fully passport, the full one. And her hair in the picture, her hair was straight. And it wasn't curled under, but it was curled up like a flip. Like they had like it's up to here and it was flipped. She said, this is how I used to look then. I used to straighten my hair then, but now I'm going natural because she had, when I saw her, she had like short little like twists on her hair. She said, this is how I used to look then. I'm going natural now. I used to straighten my hair then. I said, that was you? You were the lady with the mop and the bucket? That was you? She said, yes, that was me. I said, well, I remember the lady with the mop and the bucket looked at me with scorn and said, what are you doing? I said, I turned to her and I told her that I asked the patient to clean me up. I said, you know what that lady with a mop and a bucket did? You know what she did? I said, that lady with a mop and a bucket, she gave the patient a pair of gloves to put on to clean me up. She said, you remember that? You remember? You remember the glove? You remember? I said, yes, I remember. I said, I remember. We kept talking. I kept telling her throughout the whole conversation that I know my children are alive. I know my children didn't die. I kept talking about it. I kept repeating it over and over again. And in the whole conversation, she walked away from me about 6 or 7 times. And at one point, after I mentioned the lady with the mop and the bucket, she said to me, she asked me, she said, do you trust me to go outside to call somebody? I said, no, I don't. She said, well, follow me then. And as we walked to the door, the canteen door, the conference was just finishing and persons were walking out. And the lady who was driving the ambulance that picked me from the airport, she walked past. And like they stopped and they were talking to me, just saying like hello. And Beatrice said to a lady that was also right there, she asked the lady in front of everyone, what color was my uniform when I work at Halberton? The lady said, mint green. She said, no, before it changed to mint green. What color was the uniform? The lady said, beige. Beatrice Samuels looked at me and she said, you see? She said, you remember. You remember. She said, your memories serve you right. You remember. At that time, she attempted to walk away and I told her, no, you cannot go. So she came back into the room and we kept talking. And I kept saying that, I kept telling her, I said, you know how it feels to know that you give birth to children and you don't know where they are? That one minute you're pregnant, another minute you're giving birth, another minute you're told that your baby's died and you never bury your children. I said, I know, I can feel my children. I know they're alive, I can feel it. So that's the reason why all these years I never let it go, because I can feel it. I said, but I told her of circumstances where I would see twins and I would like dissect them with my eyes, but no one would ever know what I'm dealing with, you know. I expressed myself so vividly to her. And at one point she looked at me and she said, you know, Nurse Bob didn't have children. And she looked at me. She said that night they were alive. And Nurse Bob took them to prenatal care. I said, what happened after? She didn't respond with her mouth. She did this. I said, what happened after? She did, That's exactly what she did. She said she did that. Like, what happened after? Nurse Bob moved to Canada. She wasn't easy. Nurse Bob was not easy. She was not easy. Nurse Bob moved to Canada. I said, how long after? Not long after. A couple months to a year after. She said no one knows she was going until the appointed time. She didn't tell anyone that she was leaving until the appointed time. She said, all she said was, I'm moving to greener pastures. I'm moving to greener pastures. So I said to her, I said, are you telling me that what I have been feeling all of these years, are you telling me that my children are alive? She said, Nurse Bob moved to Canada, so I guess you have to go to Canada. I asked the question over again, are you telling me that what I have been feeling all of these years, that my children did not die, that they are alive? Are you telling me that my children are alive? Nurse Bob moved to Canada, so I guess you have to go to Canada. And we repeated that. I repeated the question 3 to 4 times, and she gave me the exact same answer. She said, I guess you have to go to Canada. From that moment on, everything changed, because I am so grateful to Beatrice. I called her 3 months after, and I asked her, I said, isn't there something you could tell me? I need more information to figure this out, because I don't know what to do. No one is saying anything. Like, what can I do? And she said, what about your aunt? What about your aunt? I said, my aunt? Which aunt? She said, don't you have an aunt who is a nurse in Antigua that is friends with Nurse Bob? Ask her. Let her tell you. Ask her what happened. Let her tell you about Nurse Bob. Let her tell you what happened. That was on the phone. I spoke to her on the phone. Even too, when I left the conference, I went back to the hotel room. I went back to the hotel, and I didn't know what Nurse Bob's name was, her first name. So I called Beatrice on the phone at the hotel in Antigua, and I said, we spoke a little bit, and I said, what is Nurse Bob's first name? She said, Roxanne. I said, how do you spell it? She said, Roxan, and I wrote it down. So I'll have to make another video that says exactly what has been happening ever since. But if you're wondering how come all of this come up, is because of that. Because for 12 years, there was no one that believed when I said the children were alive, because remember, I have no proof. I have no proof of giving birth to children that were alive. I have no birth certificate. I have no death certificate. I have no bodies to bury. There were no burial, not that I know of. There were nothing. So I'm talking and I'm telling people, hey, like, my children didn't die, and they're thinking I'm going crazy. Oh, she's crazy. Oh, she had a miscarriage, she lose a baby, and she still think that the children are alive. She suffered from postpartum depression, but I know what I knew. And it took me 12 years for someone else to come and say that to me. So I'm very, very grateful to Beatrice. I'm sure it was something nerve-wracking for her to do, but I'm so grateful. And I reached out to Antigua government by way of the Permanent Secretary of Health, Joan Carrot, in February, as I said in the other video, requesting for my hospitalization record. Because even though I was told from the hospital that there's no record of me being there, I thought it would have been vital for me to go directly to the government and ask. But here I am. So with this video, I hope that all of what I've said in the 3 videos that I've made, that it brings some kind of clarity, and it at least sparks some kind of investigation. Lynette Daniels, when Beatrice asked, what about my aunt who's a nurse in Antigua that is friends with Nurse Bob? That's not my aunt, that's my cousin. That is Lynette Daniels, the same person who was at my parents' house, the same person who spoke to me in ICU, the same person I did not know before, and she still lives in Antigua. So if anyone is watching this video, government of Antigua, I know you all are all watching, this is real. This is real, and I need your help to figure this out. So whatever investigation can start, I need that from the government. I need this to somebody to dig this up to start, because Nurse Bob left Antigua more than likely in 2005. She moved from Antigua. You see what I'm saying? So I need somebody to respond, because if I send emails to somebody in the government, clearly they're not going to respond to my emails, because I have seven unanswered emails right now. So I need help. So anyone who at all, Beatrice Samuels, whoever it is that knows more,